Hello everybody, this is John Felt. Welcome to the NCGA FMC Ag Weather Outlook for August 1st, 2015. Well, we've started August now, and I think we have changed our pattern a bit, and quite a bit actually, over the Eastern Corn Belt that we saw in May and June. But this is the number of rain days last week, and what you can see here is that the Eastern Corn Belt, we actually see quite a bit of yellow or brown. So that's saying 0, 1, or 2 days out of the last 7 there's been precipitation. Hot spot was really Iowa, northern Missouri, where we had 4 or 5 days in a row. But let's go back and look at precipitation for July. And July was a transition. We went from the really wet pattern that we saw in June to a more moderate type pattern. And you can actually see, look at the variability here. If you're right here on the Illinois-Indiana border, right in this spot right here, you only had about an inch of rain. You go a little bit further east, you had 10 inches of rain. So it's really pretty amazing, some of the variability. But overall, this was a transition. You could start to see that some areas had quite a bit less rain, but we still had pockets like in this area right here, northern Missouri, Iowa state line, very wet. So a lot of pockets of extremely wet conditions. And if we look at the percent of normal, we can see that the areas in purple received as much as 4, 5, or even 8 inches more rain than is normal. Areas in yellow less. Now let's go out to the Western Corn Belt, and we generally see a very favorable type pattern in most areas. I like to see this light green, which is indicating about an inch or so above normal. I like to run a little bit above normal, and that's what we've seen. So the Western Corn Belt looks like it's in pretty good shape as far as July goes. Eastern Corn Belt improving from what we saw at least in May and June, but we still have some pockets of extreme rain right there in the central part of the region. Now over the last 7 days, this is the observed precipitation. You can see that Illinois and Indiana, Ohio, Michigan, fairly quiet. There were some pockets of heavier rain, but overall quiet. And right there over central Iowa, that's really been the hot spot. We had a number of days of very strong storms, 6 inches of rain, maybe even isolated even heavier amounts of rain. Yellow is indicating 2 inches of rain or more. So right in this area right here has really been, over the last week, the area of the most extensive and heavy rain. This is a real nice type rain pattern when we get an inch or two per week. So Western Corn Belt, like I said, it's pretty good. Of course, there's always variability in summertime. So when I say it's really good, some of you might be saying, well, it's not so good at my farm. But again, I'm talking in general terms here. Eastern Corn Belt, this is what we sort of want to see. Now, what I don't want to see here is after June and May and June being so extremely wet, roots are shallow, and we don't want to really get in a very hot and extremely dry pattern. So I do want to stay below normal precipitation, but we don't want to go super hot and dry. So in the last 7 days, you can see the departures from normal here. 5 inches or more above normal for the week. So that's a very heavy rain right there in southern Iowa. Everywhere else, fairly close to normal, either a little bit above or a little bit below. Now this is your temperature average for the entire month of July. And look at this, we're looking at 2 to 4 degrees below normal most of the Corn Belt. Over the far upper Midwest, a bit above normal over North Dakota. But for the most part, July is going to go down in the record books as a month with below normal temperatures in most regions. Now last week, though, was an exception for the month. The last week of the month ended up a bit above normal, and what we see here is the last week of the month was from 2 to 4 degrees above normal. This is before some of the cooler air pushed in. It's not quite as extreme, this cool air, as it looked like earlier, but still it's going to be significant. And but it did not show up from this average here, with above normal temperatures last week. Now, soils are still generally wet over the Eastern Corn Belt. They're very wet in that little core there, northern Missouri, southern Iowa, and then the rest of the region, they're generally close to normal. So we want to really maintain a below normal rainfall pattern, but not shut it off over the eastern Corn Belt. We definitely want to dry out in this region, and then we just sort of want to maintain where we're at over the western Corn Belt. Well, here's the jet stream pattern, the average pattern for this week. In this area of high pressure here, this ridge of high pressure where the jet stream is bulging off to the north, this is the hot weather. And that's shifted off to the west. I've talked about that transition that we went through in July, late July. Now, this is an amplified flow, so we're getting this dip in the jet stream. And I think there's two things with this. First of all, the more pronounced type impact with this will be temperatures that will be below normal over the parts of the central and mainly the eastern Corn Belt, including the Great Lakes. But the second impact is going to be there'll be a boundary. And we have this cooler air to the north that has sort of sinks down, and then the hot weather to the west and southwest. There's going to be a boundary, and right along that, that's going to enhance precipitation. So this is an indication of what temperatures are going to average this week below normal, blue. The lighter shades of blue are just a little bit below normal, but as we get into closer to the Great Lakes, more significantly below normal. And what we see by the middle of the week, look at this, very pleasant temperatures in the mid-70s for high temperatures over the central and eastern Corn Belt. And then as we drift off to the west, we don't have to go too far where all of a sudden we get into the 90s. But for the most part, I think these extreme hot temperatures are going to remain to our west. Now, remember I said I didn't want real hot weather over the eastern Corn Belt because of that real wet spell. It doesn't look like we're going to have that. So I don't think you have to worry about that. Hopefully we'll get a little bit of rain, so it won't totally dry out either. Now here is the middle part of the month of August, and you can see very little change. That high pressure remains to the west. We have a dip in the jet stream here, so the jet stream still, this is the type of pattern we're having. Nothing's really changed here. Now the one thing you notice though is I don't have as much blue shading, and that's saying that the dip in the jet stream is not as pronounced. So this means that after this week, temperatures are going to cool, and then they'll gradually moderate. The overall pattern is going to remain the same, but it will not be all that significant. It's going to moderate a little bit more back to normal. So very little change as we go through August in the overall jet stream. Now, is this unusual? I wouldn't say it's all that unusual. Usually August is pretty quiet getting into the middle part of the month, but the jet stream's not necessarily quiet. It is still fairly active here, and that's why I do think we're going to have some precipitation right through the middle part of the month. It's not going to be this extremely quiet type pattern. So here are temperatures as of the middle of the month, and you can see eastern Corn Belt will remain maintaining that 2 to maybe 6 degrees below normal temperature type pattern. And even the central part, it looks like that's going to occur as your hot temperatures move off to the west. Okay, so let's talk about precipitation. Remember I said that boundary between the cool air and the warm air, the hot air, and right along that boundary, here's where some precipitation could be enhanced. Now, it's notorious as far as the occasional inaccuracy of precipitation in summertime, especially the quantity of precipitation. So look at this with a grain of salt, but it does look like there could be some scattered precipitation over the central area right there. Generally pretty quiet up in the far north, and maybe as we go into the eastern Corn Belt as well, the far east. Now areas in blue are forecast to see changes in soil moisture with soils getting wetter, especially northern Missouri. I think we're getting the potential here of really getting some very, very saturated type soils in this region right in here. This is a region that's been very wet over the last week or so, and it looks like another week. So we're going through the 4 weeks of our precipitation anomalies. Remember way back when, matter of fact, I think it was winter or early spring, I said it looked like a summer of ample precipitation. Well, we have not seen a week where we've had widespread yellow here, below normal temperatures. And look at the southeast U.S. We have a pattern here where from Texas across the southeast U.S., we've seen week after week with a lot of yellow. But in the central part of the nation, I see a lot of green again this week. Now, this doesn't mean we're going to have widespread heavy rain elsewhere, but I do think this ample type rainfall situation where every day there is some rainfall somewhere. Now week 2, with that pattern gradually weakening, looks like more scattered precipitation, the 20 and 30% type precipitation. So I don't think week 2 will be as active, but there will be some precipitation around. And look at week 3 now. I'm shifting to a climate model here, but week 3 is telling me that sort of the Dakotas, Nebraska, maybe Iowa and Minnesota, that would be the area with the higher probabilities of rain. And then here's week 4, hardly any change. So we're getting in somewhat of a very little change type pattern. This week a bit active, and after that, it looks like very little change. So your takeaway, this pattern of below normal temperatures over the eastern Corn Belt looks like it's going to persist right through this week and then moderate next week, but still below normal temperatures. And overall, some pockets of heavy rain this week, and then it looks like more of a scattered type rainfall pattern heading into mid-August. Glad you are listening to my briefing here today. If you have any questions or comments, there's my email. I know I hear from you from time to time. I appreciate your comments. Have a great week and enjoy the cooler temperatures if you're in the region where we're going to have highs in the 70s, which is not all that common, as you know, in August. Take care.